One of the hardest parts of psychosis wasn't the episode itself, but what came after. The fear that people would find out and would never see me the same again. Psychosis carries strong stigma still, and people often associate it with danger, hopelessness, and no future. And when you've experienced psychosis yourself, those internalized stigmas can become life defining. My name is Joyce. I'm a researcher and psychologist, and I also have experienced psychotic depression. And what I want to talk about today is something that people rarely talk about, the fact that stigma doesn't end when the symptoms do. The image that most people have of psychosis doesn't come from real people. It comes from movies, newspaper headlines, and crisis situations in the news. Not recovery stories, not management journeys, and not ordinary people like me and you. Not people you already know. When people hear the word psychosis, they often imagine someone dangerous, completely disconnected from reality, and in the active phases of psychosis. They don't imagine someone like you and me, or someone who might be on a recovery or management journey. When my initial psychotic symptoms had abated, I felt an immense fear of disclosure. I felt an immense fear of people finding out that I had experienced psychosis in the past. And my fear was particularly intense around the notion that people might not see me as the person I used to be anymore, as capable, as kind, as someone they would want to hang out with. I was afraid of judgment, fear of losing credibility. I wondered if people would trust me again. And I also experienced the fear of becoming the psychosis person, a stereotype. I worried that people would stop seeing me as intelligent, capable, or trustworthy. I wasn't just afraid of judgment. I was afraid of becoming a category, an outsider in people's minds. As a consequence, I found myself masking, so really hiding any indications that I had been unwell, or if I had to somehow disclose that I had been unwell or felt that need to do so, I would focus on the depressive part of my illness experience rather than on the psychotic part. I felt a sense of secrecy, like I couldn't be completely honest in conversations. And I internalized that stigma that I felt from other people. So, other people, when they knew or when they talked about people who had experienced psychosis, they did see them often as others, as something that couldn't happen to themselves. And I started to internalize that somehow there must be something wrong with me. I must be defective. I must be not doing well enough. I must somehow do better to be able to prevent myself from experiencing psychosis again. And I experienced a lot of shame around that. Today, I want to talk about three stigmas, three myths that surround psychosis. Myth one: people with psychosis are dangerous. Most people with psychosis are not dangerous at all. They're actually far more likely to be frightened rather than to be frightening per se. Myth two: psychosis means your life is over. People is a chapter or a dimension to their life that can be either recovered from or managed to one degree or another. It's not a whole story. It doesn't define who we are as a person, but it is just one dimension or one chapter in our lives. Myth three: people with psychosis can't function or can't contribute to society or live a satisfactory life. Many people continue to study, work, they have families, they have friends, they lead teams, and they live fully meaningful lives, right? And the hardest part isn't always only the active psychotic symptoms. It isn't always the acute experience itself, though that's very hard. It's what you start believing about yourself afterwards, and what other people believe about you afterwards. Often the stigma continues to hurt people long after the symptoms improve. And what actually helps instead is compassionate understanding, listening with an open mind, recovery focused perspectives, seeing the whole person rather than just focusing on the psychotic symptoms or behaviors, reducing shame, so making psychosis and psychotic experiences something to be talked about openly and to be listened to with curiosity, and connection, so connecting with others in similar situations, people who might know people in a similar situation, but also with generally friends and family with an understanding open mind. People recovering from psychosis don't need fear, exclusion, silencing, and dehumanization. What they need instead is safety, dignity, agency, and hope. If you've ever experienced psychosis and carry shame or disillusionment about it, I want you to know that it is not your fault. It's not something you have to be ashamed about, and it's not something that you brought upon yourself. It's not something that replaces who you are.